They're feeling their oats, a new sense of confidence on other issues, including financial regulation reform. Barney Frank and Chris Dodd, the chairs of the House and Senate relevant committees, met with President Obama at the White House today, came out talking aggressively about their prospects for the legislation, in fact, turning Republican rhetoric on health care against the Republicans on financial regulation, specifically the issue of too big to fail.
There are going to be death panels enacted by the Congress this year, but they're death panels for large financial institutions that can't make it. We're going to put them to death, and we're not going to do very much for their heirs.
And you saw that sense of aggressiveness from the administration as well. Deputy Treasury Secretary Neil Wolin went to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, got right in the face of the chamber officials who are fighting financial regulation reform, and said, you ought to be ashamed of yourself and you ought to be supporting our too big to fail legislation.
The chamber has called the proposed resolution authority a permanent bailout fund. That is precisely backward. The only way to ensure that future administrations are never again forced to bail out failing financial firms in times of crisis is to give them the tools to shut those firms down. There is no credible alternative. We will not compromise on our commitment to end too big to fail.
Now, there's still room for negotiations between Republicans like Bob Corker, Richard Shelby, and Chris Dodd and other Democrats on the floor. But the one thing that both sides seem to agree on now is that financial regulation reform is going to happen. The only question is, does it happen with just a few Republican votes or a whole lot of them, Larry?
All right, John Harwood, thank you very much. By the way, I want to say the Chamber of Commerce is a very negative force on this. Absolutely negative and absolutely wrong, in my humble opinion. It was very interesting. Let's talk to Sandler O'Neill, chief strategist, Robert Albertson, one of the best bankers and strategists I know. Listen, number one, you heard Barney Frank. This was a very nice turn of the phrase. Their bill, he says, is death panels for too big to fail big banks. Okay, now I rather like that. I have supported the Dodd approach. I know the language may not be 100%, but the language looks pretty tight to me. The end of too big to fail bailout nation. What's your take?
There's a lot in that bill, as you know. I think we've got a problem still with too big to fail. I'll meet you halfway. I think the perception will be we have ended it and everyone will be happy until the next crisis. But in reality, what I see in there and the powers they may or may not have to handle stockholders and bondholders is not that clear-cut.
Barney Frank said this morning, we covered it live, those guys were standing in front of the West Wing of the White House. He said the stockholders are going to get hurt, the creditors, the unsecured creditors. His language is tough. When you read the Dodd fact sheet, it's tough. They're talking about bankruptcy courts, this $50 billion assessment. I think the Deputy Treasury Secretary is right and the Chamber is wrong.